Welcome everyone to our latest edition of the webinar series. This is around procurement metrics that matter in an uncertain world. We brought this to you in collaboration with our partners, called Ardent Partners. So it's a lot of their research then along with our perspectives and insights. So thank you very much for all to be here today with us. What we'll do is maybe I can quickly introduce myself and a bit of GEP as the first step on our agenda, and then we can dive right into the procurement metrics, and then finally we'll have a bit of Q&A around that from all of you. So without further ado, just a very quick introduction from my side. My name is Lalit Navirajan. I'm basically the I lead the procurement services and consulting business for GEP here in the Asia Pacific, based out of Singapore for the last 18 years and been in this industry for the last 25 years. Looking forward to having a good conversation with you and look forward to all your questions and answers. Just a quick introduction to GEP, who we are. So we are a young firm, 20 plus years. We lead with technology. We're one of the leading platforms on the source to pay technology and also on the supply chain side of things. We've been consistently rated in the leadership quadrant by all the key analysts, Gartner, Forrester, IDC, Spend Matters, ISG, and so on. We're about 500 plus customers worldwide. Those are who define us really. And with them, we are embedded in their operations in about 110 countries. We have 5,500 employees worldwide with about 24 offices across the globe. Our key value proposition is that we have one hand to shake. What we provide is a unified solution, which includes both technology and consulting. One of the highlights is we don't have any implementation partners. So we do everything in-house. So this is one hand to shake really for making success in terms of any transformations or any technology implementations we do. So that's a little bit about us. And then maybe we could now dive into the presentation itself. So just to give you a highlight of what this is, as we said, this is done in partnership with Ardent Partners. And we've kind of looked at an overall 369 respondents, right? Majority of which come from the procurement function, so 86% of them, 5% in supply chain, 5% in finance and IT and operations. Job roles, 41% of them are VP level or higher, 31% is directors, 19% managers, and so on. And then again, in terms of the company revenue and size also, we have a split between what we call large companies versus mid-market and then small companies, so that we have a good representation of all of them. So that's a bit of our respondent pool, and now that you understand the profile, we can now get into really the metrics that matter. So let's start first with what's happening with the way we are working. So business as usual, what we've seen is almost about 86% of the people that are working today in the procurement department are working in a hybrid mode. We expect in multiple markets this moves more towards the right, which is all or mostly in office, and what you have on the left-hand side is a fully remote. So in 2022, I think fully remote is 9%, all or most in office is a small fraction, 6% only. And majority of it is 84% are in the hybrid stage. We expect the hybrid to continue, but maybe with more emphasis on and some sort of being in office more times, more often, maybe 3 days a week or 4 days a week as we kind of get into 2023. In terms of the focus on procurement and supply chains, I think this used to be a lot simpler business even 5-6 years ago. But recently, there have been unprecedented changes, and the speed of change has been really fast. And one of the things which really comes up right up front is supply risk. This has become quite important. This number was not this high in 2021. But in 2022, what we've seen is because of the supply shocks that people received in 2021, this has really become the prime priority in 2022. Also, what's happened is this galloping inflation. And because of that, again, cost savings is also high on the agenda. And usually it is one of the top one or so, but this time it is after supply risk, but it is very high at 38%. And the third significant factor is ESG. So that has also been quite central. There's a lot of push on supply chain managers and procurement leaders to try and get ESG on their agenda. As you know, particularly on net zero, if you look at Scope 1, Scope 2, and Scope 3 emissions, Scope 3 emissions are almost 70% of the overall emissions that are there. And a lot of it falls onto upstream supply partners, which then comes into the domain of procurement. So we see that this is likely to continue in the next year, with maybe ESG also coming more to the fore, maybe becoming higher in terms of the number of respondents who say this is a prime priority. Excuse me. I think we need to talk a little bit about the surprising state of supply risk. So what's happened is a lot of this was very unprecedented thanks to the pandemic, and after that the geopolitical tensions and risk and so on, which I don't think have worked themselves through, and we still expect a lot of uncertainty in the coming couple of years or so. And what we found is, again, people were taken unawares, and there were a lot of mishits or mismatches in supply and demand. And when we spoke to the companies again, I think only about 30% of the companies were ready in terms of having invested in a supply risk solution. The remaining 48% plan to invest, and a staggering 22% still don't have a plan to invest. So this is, again, something to think about, something to worry about, and then plan forward. Next one is on quantifying supply risk. So supply risk is so big, how are we looking at quantifying it? And what we find is about 1/3 of the base, 35.6%, have determined that among their supply portfolio, only 5% or more are basically, 5% or less are at high risk. The remaining 95% is not. Another 16.4% have determined about 5 to 10% of the supply portfolio at risk. And about a tiny fraction, 4%, basically have said more than 10% of suppliers are at risk. But still there's almost 44%, which is a large percentage of people who still haven't had the opportunity or don't have the tools or visibility to understand the risk that is still there out there. So they don't have a metrics to try and understand that risk, classify it, and then quantify it. Coming to a more traditional standard metric that we all look at as supply managers, which is spend under management. So we've seen that this has seen an improvement of about 7% since last year. So we have 67.4% spend under management. This metric is particularly important. It underlines the importance of the procurement department within a company and how the company actually goes out to suppliers and procures its products and services. So every new dollar which comes under management, there's about 6 to 12% cost improvement that is seen. So everybody starts to track this quite closely. So this year has seen an improvement, but a mild improvement of 7% overall. Savings rates, what we've seen is that actual savings rates in 2021 stood at about 6%. This is roughly about 18% lower than what we had seen last year, that is in 2020. And a lot of factors that go to it. Obviously, supply risk doesn't help matters, but there's also been inflation and so on, so that we see that this number is actually small. Going forward, again, what we've seen is the targeted savings is at 6.1%, and this is again another 19% less than what we've previously done. So all in all, I think the saving numbers show that we have underperformed as per the targets in the last year, and this year targets are yet lower than what we normally would have set. Looking at savings leakage, this stands about 7.1%. So maybe also helpful to explain what the savings leakage means. It's basically what we have expected as savings and what we finally received as savings in the bottom line. That's the leakage that we're talking about. Largely, this can be addressed if we were to tightly integrate our sourcing and contract management cycles. So the source to settle part of the workflow, if that was very well integrated, you would see that at least 40–50% of the savings leakage would go away. So this stood at about 7.1%. Next topic is around spend that is competitively sourced. So we talked about 67% being, under management, but even within that, 44% was competitively sourced. And this, if I compare with the last year, this is a 4 percentage point reduction. So it was 48% the year before. This year it was 44%. And again, maybe likely to do with some amount of uncertainty that you were trying to manage. So I think supply managers have taken this competitive sourcing slightly, more cautiously, kind of balance with reliability and working with known suppliers. Now, deep diving into sourcing itself, what we see is that this year, the savings from the sourcing program, so wherever there was a sourcing program on, we've seen 7.7% average savings number. Now, this 7.7% is low compared to previous years. For the last few years, anytime when there was a sourcing project done, the savings were around, low double digits. So this year, 7.7%, it underscores the understanding that it's harder to switch to suppliers who are completely new or unreliable, or at least seemingly not reliable enough. And the second part is around the impact of inflation itself. And that has really pushed down the actual realized impact, and that is at 7.7% at the moment. Looking into spend that is contract compliant, this is about 61%. What contract compliance means is how much of our spend is going as per the rules, the norms that we set, as per the contract prices we have fixed, or as per the preferred suppliers or channels that we've set. Anything which is not contract compliant or maverick spend, we generally tend to spend more on. And rough estimates around that is every dollar which goes as a non-compliant spend is costing us about 12 to 18% more. So this is again something which we need to tighten as supply managers, and also contributes to the overall leakage that you saw at 7%. We've been talking a lot about digitization and enabling suppliers to have a much closer collaboration. So what we've seen is that this year, the number has been at 43%. So 43% of all suppliers typically across our respondents are enabled. This number is higher than 38%, which was there last year. So people have spent time, effort, and investments to get suppliers onboarded and make sure that there are more digital ways of coordinating on orders and supply commitments, deliveries, and then invoices and so on. This number also, if I compare with 2017, it was around 24%. So there is almost a doubling of this number in terms of supplier enablement. One item which has come up quite a bit in our supply portfolio is about diversity. This is again an ESG linked topic, and what we're looking at is starting to measure this diversity spend. So in 2021, it was about 8.2%, and I would explain diversity as suppliers who are more minority-led or women-led and so on, and we're looking at that sort of diversity factor. And obviously, every company defines it slightly differently, but still, you can take an average which is around 8.2% of total portfolios, which is driven by a diversity spend factor. Next year, the target which is set is about 9.7%. So that's what we are doing in terms of diversity or the social part of the ESG. Procurement support operations. This means how much is procurement contributed to operations. And the last couple of years, given the amount of issues around reliability and so on, there's a very large percentage which has been adjudicated as being extremely helpful or making a big impact in operations. Of this, about 58% of the respondents have said that procurement has made a significant outsized contribution, and about 8% of them have basically said that procurement has been game-changing in the way they redefine their operations. So most CPOs have found that their position has been elevated. There's been a lot more exchange between the top leadership team and the CPOs, and better understanding of the supply situation, bringing them early on into most of the work which is done, so much tighter strategic alignment. And also on the flip side of things, CPOs have also come under a lot of scrutiny, and but the overall result has been quite good. The 2/3 have been recognized for their efforts and making a big impact in terms of the operational success of companies. If you go to the report card, again, a bit of a mixed result, but also underlying the difficulties that were there, the kind of not normal operations that we had. So about 14.3% of the CPOs have been deemed to have, performed far above expectations. Almost half of them above expectations, so that's overall a very large number, which is above expectations. And then obviously there were some, maybe a third of them which were kind of below expectations, met expectations, and the rest of them below expectations. So mixed report card, but also underlying the difficulties that we had in the supply chain side of things and what procurement leaders have had to do to try and manage the situation and try to be as close to business as usual. When we asked the CPOs what kind of hurdles they faced, I think one of the big numbers has been around budget constraints. So as inflation has galloped, the finance managers have actually tightened the amount of investment available, or the willingness to make out of normal spends. So they found that the budget has been a constraint most of the places. Some of the other challenges which have also ranked high among the CPOs is around managing supplier performance and supply assurance. We talked about supply risk as a big number. Missing or incomplete technology. And then this is again coming to fore when you've had to purposely, or I would say, you were compelled to actually have teams working remotely, and a lot of the gaps in the technology were then surfacing. And so there's been a resolve to actually spend more on digitalization and making sure that teams are technically enabled. But this is a big gap, a big challenge that CPOs have faced. The other 33% also speaks to difficulty in trying to manage the stakeholders, both internal and external. And that's, again, probably a offshoot of the way we're working today, which is more hybrid, and this is likely to continue. So again, some amount of effort is required to resolve these issues. In terms of top CPO strategies, right? Again, I can take a cut on this to say, well, two things which are really important for them, which come up in your top 5, which is first, how do I manage my stakeholders better? So there's a lot more emphasis on internal communication collaboration. That's a number 1, 37%. And the other part, which is also very close to 31%, is how do I improve external communication collaboration? So if this theme around communication collaboration, this is actually quite significant. The second part, which is again important, is how do we manage our workforce? How do we manage our processes in a remote situation, in a more digitally transformed situation? So a lot of emphasis on digital transformation, a lot of emphasis on improving staff capabilities, because even if I did install a lot of technology, we still need to teach people how to use that and how to move beyond a lot of the manual steps which are now automated. What do you do with your time? How do you kind of spend more time on value-added activities? What are the kind of insights you want to now start to get from technology enablement? I think that's where the emphasis has been. And also then looking at streamlined current systems and processes. This is part of the enablement program, the digital transformation program that they have in mind. So this is where people have been spending their time to try and get themselves better geared to manage all the uncertainties. Then linking that to the strategic agenda, I think the agenda for 2022 largely has been around managing supply risk, identifying cost savings at 38%, driving digital transformation again at 38%, so equally there. ESG, we talked about this right up front, 27%, and then fighting inflation, which has been a big problem for everyone this year, and improving current data strategy, which is again linking back to your digital transformation exercise. When the question was asked as to how aligned the CPO's agenda is with the CEO, I think whopping 28% of the CPOs were very tightly aligned with this overall corporate strategy. About 45% of them said they had good general alignment, so almost 73% of the CPOs said they were very well aligned with the CEOs. 27% of the CPOs acknowledged that they have poor alignment with the CEOs, and that was an area for improvement for 27% of them. We spoke a lot about communication and collaboration, so when we asked them how their efforts are towards this area, the response has been around over 52% underline the need to align better with budget holders, understand their plan, their forecasts and so on, and try to better manage supply this year. About 60% said we are focusing on suppliers and supplier outreach, putting a lot of focus on how they have been performing and their evaluation and process and driving innovation in that supply chain. And about 62% said they're focusing more on functional groups who are, and this is particularly important for indirects, but also in the direct side, the manufacturing team and other teams, to try and understand how to drive day-to-day operations better and how best to support them in this. We spoke about digital transformation. So if we look at the procurement technology adoption, we find that among the top 5, focus has been more on efficiency, which is around e-procurement, e-sourcing, and then e-payables, and a couple of things around understanding the spend better or managing the spend better through automated spend analysis and automated contract management. So these have been the few areas where people have invested a lot. But like we said, if you look at supplier risk part of things, I think 1/3 of the respondents have been looking at supplier risk management, supplier information management, and supplier performance management. So that has been also been in use, not as much as we would like to see, but at least 1/3 of the respondents, basically 1/3 to 1/4, have been spending a lot more effort in terms of understanding the supplier side of things better, managing, mitigating risk, getting more information, and then evaluating the performance to try and optimize it better. What we would do is now look at some of the best in class. So far what we've done is we've actually discussed average scores. I think what would be helpful now is to see, well, average scores being one side, what is the difference between average and best in class? And that's where some of these insights are truly remarkable. So looking at best-in-class performance, addressable spend versus that is sourced, we have seen that there's 57% of spend that is sourced in best-in-class companies compared to, say, 41% in all the others. This is at least a 45% improvement overall in terms of the metrics. So that's how far best-in-class is better. And like we said, right, every item which is not sourced properly, we probably have about 12 to 18% improvement potential. So that's the amount of loss between this and 16 percentage points of spend where you're not getting that additional value. So best in class in terms of spend compliance, what we find is best in class companies do about almost 75% compliance spend. And if you remember, the average was around 61%, and the others basically fall into the bracket of 57% only. So there is a lot of gap to be covered between the remaining, I would say, the laggards of the system versus the best in class. In terms of enabled suppliers, if you remember, the average was around 43%, but best in class enabled suppliers about 57.4%. Versus the remainder, which is around 39%. So this is again a 40% improvement that the best in class has over and above the number that you have in the enabled suppliers range. So what is the best in class advantage? 57% times better alignment, right, in terms of their plans versus overall objectives of the company. You have 2.4 times higher visibility. In terms of strategic sourcing technology, you're about 51% more likely to have an e-sourcing solution in place and 2.3 times more likely to have an advanced sourcing optimization where you use multiple features, e-options, or post-bid analytics, presto benchmarking, and so on to try and get that additional competitive advantage. And from a data science, data engineering point of view, it's like 73% are more likely to have a very active data strategy in place. And today, if I were to make a point, the data strategy goes beyond what we normally have used in the past, which is around ERPs. I think today we're looking at multiple sources of data. So if you look at internally within a company, you're talking about not just the ERP, but also warehousing management systems, quality management systems, looking at lab results of various companies, looking at uptime, looking at sales issues with products and so on. So there's a lot more data which is internal, which is very relevant to procurement and understanding supplier performance. But there's also a host of external data, and particularly in the last year, we've seen that we've had to do that analysis, which is around how market indices have moved, how some of the benchmarks have moved in terms of performance, in terms of deliveries, and so on. So there's a lot more industry watch which has had to be done to be better prepared in terms of taking decisions. And again, more than twice, of the companies on the best sourcing side actually have capable data science teams that they're building up to try and mine the data better, get better insights to take decisions. So how people define their procurement game changers? About 52% have said better data visibility, better analytical capabilities. 30% have said we've installed new technologies or improved our technologies from the previous generation to the new generation. So a lot of data enablers around AI, ML, NLP processing, automation. 25% said they've improved their use of current technology, which leads to better training, better improvement in terms of how to use the existing software and technology that we have. Another 25% said better supplier management processes, and this is again necessitated by the supplier risk that we've had to face and overcome. And then finally, a better communication with business stakeholders. About 24% of them said that. So that, I think, was all in all, a quick roundup of the key metrics that really mattered, particularly given the backdrop of the supply chain disruption that we've seen, the amount of inflation we've seen, and having to have working in very remote groups, remote operations in the last couple of years as we come back to more, I would say, business as usual in 2023. So let me take a pause and maybe we could open up for questions. There's a question from Stephen which says, the same procurement challenges exist today as they did 5 to 10 years ago, despite the proliferation of procurement technology within organizations. What difference is tech making in a business? Why do you think the business still experiences these challenges despite investing in procurement tools? So thank you, Stephen, for that. I think I like to differ a bit in terms of the procurement challenges. I don't believe 10 years ago we were worried about ESG. I don't think we were worried about supplier risk being such a big factor. In fact, over the last 10 years, the inflation climate has been very stable, low inflation environment, reasonable growth, and there have not been severe challenges to companies, where there might have been a chance of going under or being bankrupted or so on. So the supply challenge was not that high. But I agree, the type of challenges are similar. I think some of them have become more stark. So supply risk has become a very big topic in the last couple of years, particularly. Logistics management has become a very big topic in the last couple of years. So we've seen a lot of sharpening in those areas. The second question was around what's happened with procurement systems and investments and so on, and why have they not delivered the impact? I think that is the kind of question. So one, I think procurement technology earlier was more, here's my solution, let's deploy all of that, and then let's hope for the best. So that was the, I would say, approach taken. But I think now we are spending a lot more effort in terms of making sure that there is user acceptance, there's more adoption. So we are looking at a user-backed lens for deploying technology. As you can see, some of the tools that we use, or the apps that we use on our iPhones or Android phones, are so different from the typical toolkit that you see on your computers around sourcing and procurement. They're extremely unfriendly, they're difficult to deploy, and there's a lot of stress while trying to do the paperwork. It has not made life simpler. And I think the focus now is more around how do we understand what are the ways in which we can increase user acceptance, user adoption, how do we make it more friendly, and I think there's been a lot of effort to try and get that information. I think the second aspect is around the access to information. 10 years ago, we didn't have this sort of access. Now, if you look at our availability of data, not yet fully integrated, but availability of data, we are going beyond our transaction systems in our ERP, and we're tapping multiple sources of data to get better insights. So I think there's hope for all of us in that, and that's something. Another question, do you have views on saving leakages percentages by industry? Any view on which industry performs the best in avoiding saving leakage? I don't have a number by industry, but I have a number typically by whether the thing we procure is a product or a service. So I would say products, typically the saving leakage is around 3 to 5%, sometimes even lower. And on the services side, this is quite high. This can be around 10 to 15%, and I've seen even higher leakages. And the way they manifest is in terms of change orders or change requests, where you change the scope, you add additional activities, or it happens when you get the services performed, but they're not of the quality that you required. And so what happens is there is, because of that poor quality of work, there's more rework which is ordered. Let's say there's a maintenance of a plant which is to be done, and the maintenance has not been done properly. So if it is to run for another 12 months and there's a premature failure, you had to stop at 9 months. There is a cost to that, and there's a cost of doing this additional rework earlier in time, which never gets recorded in our systems, but that is actually a very real example of a leakage. So I hope that answer helps. Which industries perform better? I think it's more about how closely integrated is your source to settle process. And I would ask questions around how your contracts built. Do you have the right T&Cs? Are the terms and conditions really, really strong enough to provide both a penalty and an incentive? So are you really marking that penalties and incentives against the invoice payments that come? Are you monitoring the obligations of the suppliers and linking that to payments? I think these are the questions which are relevant when we're looking at leakage prevention. So if the answer to that is no, then then your contracts are not strong enough to claw back anything. And the other part is, even if there were clauses there, I'm not even sure if there is a process today to monitor performance and link that to payment. So you need to close the loop between what is happening out in the field, collect the data, provide it then to the AP process in the finance team, and close the loop. So that, again, doesn't happen in many places. I hope that answers the question on supply and savings leakage. There's a question around what are the factors that drive source of settlement or manage savings leakage? I think I just answered that. So that is about having a better contract in place and managing the processes better. Any other questions? Or I see now. I see the chat. Okay. There's a question from Piyush which says, are you finding commodity price unavailability and uncertainties across supply chains still a big problem? And any visibility for normalcy? So I do think that commodity prices are still going to fluctuate quite a bit. I think this unavailability and uncertainty has eased in this year, but I think there is still a lot of supply shocks which might happen. If we look at the current economic climate, we are on a knife's edge. I used to say that at least 8 weeks back. Now I would say we are now tilting towards recession, and that is going to surface maybe a lot of other issues around, amount of liquidity, amount of solvency in companies, and so on. There's going to be a deleveraging, cycle, which will also happen. So there is a lot more uncertainty that we have to process in our supply chain. So we should be watchful, mindful of which suppliers may actually face a lot of stress in this area. So I do think there's a lot of problems in this still that we need to work through as supply managers. There's a question around by Shirley Liu. What do you see as a trend of using autonomous robots in supply chain in the next 5 years? How will regulations affect the use of robots? I think this we could spend a lot of time answering. But look, I think one lot of warehousing automation is happening today. And that brings to question a lot of the reliability of operations, the timeliness of operations, running 24/7 operations, and so on. So there are plenty of use cases here, and I see more and more of that coming through. Whether there are regulations, I think that will depend a lot on the size of the impact. Asia, at least, is still I would say, relatively more efficient workplace with a more affordable workforce. So I expect that this will happen slower than the rest of the world. So we probably have a window of time to watch how others are adopting these practices and then how that starts to affect us. So I think there is still some time in terms of still trial and error, and I think I would probably see this getting sharper in the next 4 or 5 years. A question from Michael Oscar. Would be interesting to get a CFO viewpoint on CPO and procurement, whether this changes the supply chain smoothened out in the future. Seen the movie before, procurement becomes fixers during turmoil and disappear, become transactional again. I think this is a very terse assessment. I sort of agree sometimes with that, being a procurement manager myself all my life. So I do think this is a concern that during crisis, everybody kind of comes on to you to kind of support. And after that, if things become normal again, then you start to become a bit invisible. So that's one thing. I think the onus is on us. And this is where I try to contrast between procurement and sales. We are basically two sides of the same vehicle, wheels on one side and the other. Look at how sales have actually become more intimate with their customers, have driven a lot more value by better guidance, better forecasting, better understanding of the situation. And I like to say, as procurement, we've not done that much. So I think it is on us to leverage all the technology available, all the data available, become more closer to our suppliers. A lot of us don't even understand or know our suppliers' full names, their families, their people, they're all people, but we don't connect with them at a people level. We are very transactional in our approach. Whereas if you see sales guys, they remember their birthdays, their wedding anniversaries of the customers, number of kids, which schools they go to. I think there's a lot of work required to be done if you want to elevate ourselves, and we should not we shouldn't have this victim mentality. We should really try and see how to elevate ourselves and elevate our function. And I think these opportunities or challenges, they actually provide you with a better platform to kind of underscore your importance. Maybe I have time for one last question. Maybe this is from Tina, saying, in the 21st century, what skills and knowledge procurement professionals need to unskill to cater to technology advancement? I think, so let me be a little bit philosophical in this. I think one of the things that we are bound by as procurement professionals is this feeling that we need to have our arm's length distance from our suppliers. And this is all coming from audit days, or worries about non-compliance or worries about favoritism, and we need to get away from that. And again, going back to my sales versus procurement challenge, right? There is equal amount of collusion or collaboration possible on the sales side as well, but that has never stopped our sales professionals, our sales colleagues to do more. Get more closer to customers, get more intimate with customers, and I think we need to do the same thing. The second thing is we need to learn what is the purpose of audit. Most of the audit principles are laid out in the 70s, 80s, and so on. It's time to now look at all of that. Why do we need a compliance which is happening before the event? Why can't we do post-event compliance, post-event fraud analysis? Right? Let the events happen quickly. And by events, I mean placing orders, placing decisions on buying. We can always look at it from the back. If you see there's something which is not meeting the eye, we do a deeper dive on that. But that will really help us move faster, put our effort in the right places, than trying to be very processy and just doing a lot of non-value added work. So maybe that is a quick answer to this question, Tina. Maybe with that, I think we're out of time. Maybe with that we can close it. If there are questions, if there's any follow-up required, any other thoughts that come to you, please don't hesitate to reach out to us at GEP. With that, let's close the session for today. Thank you for attending, and really appreciate the interaction that we had so far. Have a good day, all of you.